This is Food for Thought with Deborah Walker. Hi everyone, this is Deborah Walker with Food for Thought, and today I have the second interview with the lovely Siobhan Pestano, who recently she came on to talk about horse meat, and this time she's going to come and talk to us about Zoopharmacognasy, which I hope I've said right, Siobhan.
You said that right, Debbie, well done.
Yay!
Bit of a mouthful, but well done. No, that's completely correct.
Mexican wave moment from Surrey. Right, Siobhan came to do a herbal session with my dog, and this is how I learned about Zoopharmacognasy. I'd been searching for someone who could do bits and pieces because I couldn't resolve an issue with my dogs. So I was really excited when I met Siobhan, and she's training at the moment in Zoopharmacognasy, so it's not yet qualified, but you've agreed to kind of talk about Zoopharmacognasy today and explain what it means, as well as what you exactly did with my dog.
Okay, well, let's start off with the name, which is a bit of a mouthful for most people. But Zoopharmacognasy, what is it? Well, the word, if you break it down, zoo, pharma, and cognosy, is animal medicine knowing. And Zoopharmacognasy itself is it's a homeostatic behaviour which animals use. They self-medicate to either prevent or resolve disease. And what I'm learning to be is, I'm studying is applied Zoopharmacognasy, where a practitioner enables an animal to self-medicate. Because the difference is, Debbie, obviously in the wild, animals are free to roam and forage, usually from a very kind of diverse range of plants. And in captivity, and that's all kinds of captivity, whether they're a companion animal or a horse, even a horse in a field is quite often in the grass, or if they're zoo animals or farm animals, they don't have that freedom. They're usually given a diet, and that's kind of it. They don't have the ability to self-medicate. So applied Zoopharmacognasy is making the constituents they need available to them, bringing them into their environment, and then seeing, if they want them, they're there. It's up to the animal.
It says a lot about our environment now, that actually they can't find it in their natural environments.
Well, I think obviously, again, breaking it down to whether it's a dog that you take on a walk, or if it's a farm animal, there's a lot of money invested in some farming systems with pre-prepared food. It's not always that the situations are terribly sterile and limited. It is just that most animals are in some kind of captivity, especially in a country as relatively small as the UK, but obviously this applies around the world. Then they're generally not free to roam. So, and if you've got a companion animal, for example, there's a lot of money spent in the pet food industry, varying types of pet food, but in terms of what's out there in the garden, that's usually not so many medicinal plants out in your average garden. I think a lot of people do, when I tell them about it, they go, oh gosh, that's right, I've seen my dog or cat go out to the garden and eat grass, and then quite often they're sick after they've done it. Is that it? And I said, well, that is a form of it, because obviously purging is a very natural way for a dog to cleanse itself. And so, that is a basic form. Obviously, we don't offer them grass per se, but that's kind of the basic principle of how it works. I think that most people can associate with.
And it is interesting around dogs eating grass, because lots of people will stop their animal from doing that. I notice when I'm walking my dog, people go, no, you're not eating that. And I encourage my dog, because I notice it's not always the same types of grasses that she eats. She'll eat different things.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing with Zoopharmacognasy, self-medication is a natural behaviour for an animal, and the best chance you've got of enabling its well-being is to enable its natural behaviours, because when an animal can't, I'm not just talking about self-medicating now, lots of different things. I mean, I just got some ex-battery hens, and the first thing they did after being locked indoors for 18 months was run into my garden and dirt bathe, because even though they've never seen dirt before, it's a natural behaviour, and being unable to express natural behaviours is stressful for an animal. So I don't agree that people should. I think a lot of people, a thing that you hear quite often is my animal will eat anything, which actually quite often from what I've seen isn't true at all. It might appear that way. And also, I think that people sometimes, they're doing it from a protective perspective, especially the street where they don't know what's been passed. Could their animal get a disease? Has anyone spilt anything poisonous on it? That whole thing might also make them a little bit jumpy. So I can understand it, but the general principle of, I don't want my dog to be sick because that's really horrible for it, is a bit anthropomorphic. We don't like being sick, but it's still the way our bodies deal with getting bad stuff out. And it's the same for a dog. If it chooses to eat something which is going to make it be sick, there's a reason for it, and it'll feel a whole lot better for it.
I love the way it works, to be honest. How did you find out about it?
Somebody bought, it's one of those kind of just really, it was meant to be things. Somebody gave me a leaflet about something, which made me go and buy a book, which made me get on the internet. And then suddenly I just came across the Ingraham Academy of Zoopharmacognasy, and I just started reading, and I was like, oh my goodness, wow, this just sounds amazing. Half a bookshelf full of stuff on herbs and half a bookshelf full of stuff on animals, and for some reason it hadn't really occurred to me that the two could be so complementary. I mean, it is still a relatively emerging science. It only started really getting looked at in the sort of early 80s. That's how new it is. And so the academy where I'm studying is, I think, the only place in the world really where you can get qualified in it. Caroline Ingraham is probably the world's leading authority on the subject, and it's just absolutely fascinating. I love it.
And what do you find really fascinating about it?
Well, for example, I think the first practicals, I mean, the course I attend, you do a lot. Obviously, there's a lot of theory. You need to know how stuff works and why, and there's a lot to learn all about the plants and stuff. But obviously, practicals are very important as well. And at my first practical, for example, people invited to bring in animals if they had any issues. And I remember somebody brought a dog, and it had an ongoing ear problem, not unlike Frost actually, but different scenario. And obviously, the vet had been consulted. And the problem wasn't resolving itself. And so, Caroline was showing us all about how you offer and, what you'd offer for this kind of situation and why and so on. And to cut a very long story short, because it is a process which really does need patience, you can't rush the animal and you can't rush the process. But to kind of cut to the chase, the dog in the end selected seaweed. It didn't want to take it orally. There are a few different routes for administration I can tell you about in a minute, but basically wanted it topically. So it's mixed into some aloe gel because that helps push it into the skin. And even though the dog selected the extract, you still go on and re-offer to the dog before you touch it. It's like, this is what I'm proposing. And, all of us watching, we knew the dog had an ear problem, so obviously it's going to want it on its ear. And so Caroline moved very gently and offered it to the dog's ear, and the dog pulled away. And I was like, ooh, did I imagine that? Did I misinterpret? And she re-offered it again, and the dog very clearly pulled away, turned round, lay on its back, opened its legs and presented its groin. And so she asked its owner, oh, this is interesting. Is there any reason why it might be, that you're aware of, might be presenting its groin instead? She went, oh, it had a tick bite a few weeks ago. And Caroline went, oh, that's interesting. Do you think it might have been related to its ear problem? And the owner said, oh, yes, actually, exactly the same thing happened last year. So Caroline then re-offered, brought her hand into the groin area, and the dog lay there, happy as Larry, had the stuff applied. And then later on in the afternoon, it was re-offered again. And again, it was reoffered initially to its ear. The dog pulled its head away, turned around and did this lovely ballet plie its leg so that it could be applied in the groin area again. It knew exactly what it wanted. What was required was the stuff, the extracts that it needed, and also this whole act of listening, and not just, we have a tendency to kind of rationalize with our eyes or with our brains. Well, I know this and I can see this, therefore I need to do this. And sometimes that's just not, obviously you know this because you specialize in holistic medicine, but a lot of the time medicine tends to treat the symptom rather than the cause. And what I love about zoopharmacognasy is the fact that by enabling an animal in its environment to choose for itself, it can address things exactly as they need to be addressed. It can choose the dosage, it can choose the extract, it can choose whether or not, it's what we call the route of administration, whether it's smelling it, inhaling it, having it topically applied, or ingesting onto the animal. And it's just fabulous.
Absolutely. I have to say it was amazing watching you work with my dog. Now, just explain the range of things that you might offer to the animals.
In terms of sort of general groups of extracts?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we've got obviously essential oils, and I would like to be really clear. When I say essential oils, I don't mean things that cost a couple of quid from your local health store, and I'm not knocking them. They're lovely to put in the bath or burn in, oil burners or something, but you really have to have really top grade pure essential oils to get proper results. So and the essential oils, what they are, they just contain the medical constituent of a plant. So you could have the equivalent of several thousand cloves of garlic, for example, in one tiny bottle, because all it is the constituent of the garlic. So those are probably power packer things that form a vast part of my kit. We also offer different dried powders and extracts. They don't have any kind of value for energy. So although they have nutrients and minerals and vitamins, they're still counted as what we call secondary metabolites rather than primary metabolites, which are food. So you've got dried powders, you've got base oils and macerated oils, which again, they're things that an animal can ingest. Macerated oils obviously have active ingredients from plants soaked into them, and it provides a different route for getting things into the body and different areas of the body. We have CO2 extracts, things like seaweed, and they really resemble very much the taste and smell of the actual plant itself. Excuse me, I'm going to cough. So we have dried powders, also dried herbs. Dried herbs are really nice. Depends on which group of animals, whether you're working with equines or felines or canines. Obviously, dried plants, very popular with horses, and some of the dried extracts are really good to start off a really gentle session with cats. It's quite a good way of seeing what they're choosing, and it might be an indication of what's wrong with them. Quite often, cats will toddle over to the peppermint if they've got tummy troubles, or it's, I do work at the RSPCA where you've got a lot of stressed cats, and they can also just really encourage behavioural releases that they don't have the opportunity to exhibit. But anyway, let me not digress. So those are kind of bunch of, you saw my kit when I brought it in. Most of it was essential oils because they really are super powerful, very, very fast acting, very, very effective, but with the other things all supporting them so the animal can choose.
What I found fascinating is, because I also work with a chiropractor who uses for zoopharmacognasy, and it's fascinating listening to the behavioural changes, which is what you were just talking about in horses, which is what she predominantly works with, where horses who can be either highly strung or really almost depressed can change really very quickly their behaviour.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just starting my equine course at the moment. Actually, I've just done some practicals a few months ago, and again, just fascinating to watch. Really, really traumatized animals where we do our practicals, and obviously, if you've got animals coming in that are deeply traumatized to a rescue home, part of the problem is that they may need medical attention that they can't get because they're just so scared that they won't come close enough. And obviously what you've got again is the possibility of offering things like powders like barley grass and stuff, which is very good for calming down a high animal, or they can go straight for oils which affect the nervous system, because it's all about messages to the brain, communication, and so the effects can be really quick. And once you've managed to stem that kind of ongoing message of stress, once that's calmed down, then the animal can slowly take steps forward. And again, it's not a fast thing. I mean, we worked with one horse one afternoon, which took probably a good hour and a half. I think we worked with it an hour and a half one day and probably the same again the next day. But it went from being completely unapproachable to putting its muzzle in one of the carers' hands in a sort of, it was a really lovely moment. It's actually quite touching, but it had come so far just in that one sort of weekend, just by the effects that these extracts had on its physical body and its neurological messages, and it enabled it to help itself.
Amazing, absolutely amazing.
It really is. It really is, Debbie. I mean, to watch it in action is fantastic.
No, it's not a fast process by any stretch of the imagination, because you talked about patience. You took, I think it was over 2 hours with my dog.
Yeah.
With what was she had an ear issue, but it was like all the way down one side of her body. You just couldn't go near one side of her body, and she just kept flipping her head around. And no matter what I did, and I was putting herbs in her dinner, I was putting supplements in, I was doing all sorts of things with her. It was making some difference, but it wasn't getting to the root of the problem. And just explain what you did with my dog, because it was absolutely phenomenal watching. I've actually got pictures, everybody, on my website, on a blog about Siobhan, because the work that she did with my dog was absolutely brilliant.
Oh, thank you. I mean, what I did, obviously after you and I had client consultation, that's always the first really, really important part of the process, to get as much information as we can about the animal. What we normally tend to do, we look at the information on the consultation, and from that you think, well, given this and this, I think, in Frost's case, we knew she had a physical problem, but we knew she had significant trauma in her past, and so, I mean, the thing about this process is you have a kind of a theoretical order of offering. You start off with sort of quite gentle introductory oils like angelica root and cornflower water.
Which are doing what? Just explain what they were doing, your intention behind them were.
Angelica roots can be very calming, soothing entry into the whole process, and good for focusing an animal who's maybe cornflower water as well is quite often selected by animals who are not settling to the process. Most of these things have other, like cornflower water is very good for eyes and so forth. These aren't the only things they do, but those two extracts are very commonly selected at the beginning of a process. It's very helpful. Now, I do, Frost, for example, had took a deep breath, I think, at the first offering of the angelica root. But then you tend to work with the essential oils, and you have your theoretical order of offering. So what I started offering with Frost And obviously, again, re-emphasizing this all had to be done very slowly because she was very sort of down, wasn't she? She wasn't moving very much at all.
That's my dog, to be honest.
But her reactions are very small. I mean, some animals, their reactions are much more visible. It varies from animal to animal. But given what I knew about her, the trauma in her history, I was offering emotional oils to start with, things like rose and can't remember off the top of my head, but would have been things like neroli rose, those sort of things. Rose, very, very important in a situation like this. And offered several oils to her, and she really didn't seem to be engaging in any of them. Now, that's not a problem. It's just, okay, this is what we normally do, but this isn't what's working for Frost. So, you have to leave it long enough with several extracts to think, okay, this really, really and truly knowing what I know about her, one of these would have been of interest to her, I think, but she's not engaging at all. So I think she wants to address physical body first, and that's absolutely fine. Again, it's all about what the animal wants. So then I think we started offering spirulina, and as you remember, that was her first sniff of interest. She was interested, but she didn't want it. She didn't want it like. So again, once you've got interest, it's like, okay, I can see you want the spirulina. How would you like the spirulina? Would you like it dry as a powder? No, it seems not. Would you like it dry on my fingertips? No. Would you like it in a base oil? No. Would you like it in some water? And you offer and you offer, because once the interest is there, it's very likely that, if you just keep offering them different combinations, then they'll hit on what it is they want. Unfortunately, they can't tell us. Yeah. So that's where the patience comes in. You've got the things available. You can bring them into their environment. And I think she then selected coconut oil, which is a great favourite with dogs. It's got lots and lots, antiviral, antifungal, antibacterial, lots of really, really good fats. And then she liked that, and she liked the spirulina squashed into that, which she did very slowly. And really, she had a good third of a large jar, I think, of coconut oil, and quite a lot. That was what she needed, because sometimes they just need that real big vitamin and mineral boost to enable them to start metabolizing the really strong extracts in the essential oils. So after she did that and had a little rest, I think then we moved on to other physical body oils, and she selected bitter almond repeatedly, didn't she, for a very, very long time?
Yes, it was absolutely fascinating. She finished off half a jar of coconut oil. It just fascinating. I would never have given her coconut oil. I'd never thought about it. Lots of other oils in her dinner, but never coconut oil. And spirulina, I never really give her any algae at all, interesting enough. She is a dog that's on superfoods. But
I think she probably has a better diet than a lot of dogs. But the interesting thing you mentioned about food, about putting things in the food, that is one of our kind of golden rules, if you like, in terms of how we practice. And what we would always advise somebody is to not put stuff, worst case scenario, if you're absolutely convinced that it's necessary, you could offer half of whatever the diet is with things added and half without. Again, the golden word here is choice, because some things, the plants do have medicinal compounds in them. Sometimes, like any medicine, if something isn't required, it can upset a balance and cause another problem. And by putting things, which again is very much part of our culture, when we put things on food, the animal's choice has been removed. So if it wants its food, it'll have to eat the extract. Some, are more benign than others, but as a general rule, I would say it's probably better to offer, either offer it beside the food or put half of it on the food and half of it not on the food, and see what the animal does. Because again, there's a lot of information there in what it chooses to do. But I think Frost has probably got a healthier diet than 99% of dogs in the area.
What I learned from you was that, to actually put the herbs that I give her by the side of her dinner. So if I choose to do something with her, I choose to give her oils or things, I literally put them in a bowl next to her dinner, and she can just, mosey around it as far as I'm concerned and choose what she wants out of it. And that was one of the most interesting things. And then she's never really gone back to the coconut oil. I've left coconut oil out for a number of times, and she doesn't bother about it. So that's been really fascinating as well for me.
Yeah. Well, again, because it's being taken. I mean, there's a little bit of grey area, obviously, because oils do have calorific value, but if she's selecting for medicinal reasons, it's a sort of secondary metabolite aspect rather than the coconut oil as food. That's why she's having it. So she's not going, oh, it's my favourite food or one of my favourite foods. I like coconut oil. I like to eat it. It'd be one of those things where I like to eat it if I'm, maybe a bit out of balance, or I need that in my diet. So, and with other things like occasionally she might not have it for months. It's that thing of it's taken when it's needed rather than a regular, which again I think is culturally very normal for us. It's like, oh, I give my dog a bit of this, or I give my horse a bit of this, and I put a handful of this and this and this in the food once a week or 3 times a week. And with some things like stuff like garlic and things like that, it can end up causing problems. So at the end of the day, if you put it beside the food and she doesn't want it, then at least well, thank goodness I didn't put it in the food, because you obviously didn't want it. So it's quite interesting to observe that way, I think. Yeah,
for me, it's been really interesting working. Occasionally, I get given animal hair, and people just ask me, will I screen their animal hair so that I can see the deficiencies? And more often than not, I will see that they've got overloads of sugar and they're not digesting properly from a number of different factors, but mostly the food that they're just given, because they've got all of these extra nutrients pushed into them, and they're just imbalancing the animal.
No, exactly. It's a little bit of a problem, and even sort of friends of mine and stuff, because you don't like to be pushy, but sometimes it's quite frustrating when I've seen a dog with a tummy problem, and it's like, oh, the vet said do this and then put this, and this is good for it, so put it on its food, and the poor dog's standing there looking at me going, I don't want to eat it. And it's like, you're being a naughty dog. No, the dog's not being naughty, it just doesn't want it. They're designed to be able to smell what is good for them and what isn't good for them. That's how they're designed. It's not being a naughty dog if it turns its nose up at something that, somebody very well-meaningly has gone and bought extracts and expensive, sensitive tummy food and stuff. And as you say, the extra things which have all gone into it just can sometimes cause imbalances.
Well, there's so many animals now medicated. I walk my dog every day. We're with a lot of friends that I have, and I would say at least a third of the dogs are on medications like the humans. This is just madness now. And when you came along, and it was about 4 months I'd had this problem with my dog for, and in one session, the next day it was like it had never happened. One session with you, and it just blew me away, to be honest, the response. I wasn't expecting such a fast response from it.
Yeah, and the thing is, you might not always get as fast a response. It's not always a magic wand, but what it is, I would say invariably, the animal is going to be better than when you started, because you have made things available to it for it to select. It's like, again, because we're both interested in holistic health, we know that if you go to the doctor and you get given something for whatever symptom you're presenting, it's not necessarily addressing the cause. Somebody with a bad back might be given painkillers, but that bad back might have been because of something traumatic that happened 8 months or 8 years previously. That's at the root of the cause. And the brilliant thing about having this range of extracts, they have different active constituents. they work in different ways as well. I mean, you could have, a whole bunch of antibacterials, for example, and each one of those work with the body in a different way, in a slightly different way. And so you can offer the animal all these things, and it knows and it can choose what it needs. So even if you don't get a no, I mean, don't get me wrong, a lot of the time the results are astonishingly fast. But sometimes they take longer. But the fact is, it is progressive and it is positive, because the animal can go, oh, I need some vitamins. Oh, I've got this behavioural, well, it doesn't obviously consciously think that, but it can address behavioural issues which might be a long way back, or trauma, which might be contributing to a lowered immune system. And it can do all of that because all these things are available to it. And that's what's brilliant about it. And
that's what you did when you came back the second time. You actually worked with her on the emotional side of things, didn't you?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, again, there's this, to sort of go back to where, one rationalizes as a human. In my rational head, the first time I saw Frost, she moved on to the bitter almond and she stayed with it for a long time. And you can really see, I mean, we could both really see very clearly her processing of the oil. And, in my head, I thought, I still knew, well, obviously we haven't really addressed the behavioural issues yet. And when she's finished with this, then I'm going to go back and, move back in with my emotionally related or behavioural oils. But she had other ideas. Once she'd finished with the bitter almond, she was exhausted. And
she always looks like that, Siobhan.
But, she sort of changed from being exhausted in this direction to sort of getting up, turning away. I mean, a lot of dogs will literally distance themselves, go and walk to the other end of the room and sit and turn their back on you, just to make sure it's absolutely clear you understand that they've finished. Because she was quite inactive, so her turning her head away and her body language absolutely very much looked like she was finished. And again, it's that thing of, well, you might have these ideas of what you think the animal needs, but the animal's got its own idea. So, even though I went back the second time and I took out, a bunch of physical body stuff first, I could just tell by her reactions that she wanted to move into the emotional and she was more ready. And it's all about that kind of timing.
It was absolutely incredible to watch you do the emotional side of things as well. Now, just explain the processing side, because when Frost was processing, you could see she was sat like a sphinx and she was just kind of shaking with her eyes shut. I've got a couple of photos of it on the website. It was just astonishing to watch her. And I thought, is that typical? Just explain the processing side of things and how long that's likely to last for.
Well, in terms of, I mean, what happens in terms of routes of administration, it depends on on the species. Okay, so you can have, quite often, inhalation is one of the main routes of administration, I think, especially with dogs and cats, especially with cats, because they can't really metabolize oils, so it's all pretty much inhalation. But there's more than one way to inhale. They can either inhale through the mouth, which goes down into the lungs, and that gets pumped straight up towards the heart and pumped around the body really quickly. It's, the lungs got really thin membrane. It's a big surface area. It's a really good way of getting a quick hit of these volatile molecules into the body. There's two other ways they can inhale. They can inhale both olfactory, but they can either inhale through the nose or through the vomeronasal organ. Now, most mammals have got a vomeronasal organ. We, as humans, decided, I think a very long time ago, that we didn't need ours. We don't have one. Most mammals do. And basically, brain.
Siobhan, just stop a second, say that again, because I've lost you.
Okay, so if you imagine, if you were looking at Frost's head, if you could sort of look inside it,
yep.
If I offered her an oil and she was taking it with her mouth open and taking it through the mouth, it would be an indication that she was wanting that to go into her body. Mm-hmm. And so a physiological issue where it can go down in inhaled into the lungs have a thin membrane and a large surface area, and molecules inhaled into the lungs are then going to be sent up to the heart and pumped around the body. And so that can literally start happening within a minute. If she wanted to address behavioural problems or issues or imbalances, she can inhale through either using her nose, which is one olfactory route, and the nose has lots of chemical cell receptors, or her vomeronasal organ, which is like smelling through the mouth. Okay, and when the vomeronasal organ is used, the molecules go up, are carried to the it's a bit sciencey, this olfactory bulb, and then from there that relays it to the limbic system of the brain, which is associated with emotions.
Oh, wow.
Okay, and so what happens when an animal goes out of homeostasis? I mean, obviously we take our animals to the vet when they look sick. It's not, again, in an animal's survival instincts to look sick. So if in the wild, as soon as they start going out of balance, whatever that cause is, rather than waiting for it to, become a terrible big deal, as soon as they go out of balance, the brain starts releasing chemical messengers into the body. Could be dropped down via hormones and so forth. And that will make the nose will start developing extra whatever the plants are that contain the medical constituents which are required to address that particular issue. Does that make sense?
It does.
It's a little bit, yeah. On radio, I mean, if you've got pictures to point at, it's quite helpful. It's a bit heavy going on the radio, but that's basically how it works.
Oh, wow.
And so you've got this kind of route of connection between the brain. Once enough molecules, I mean, obviously in the wild, the animals are probably dealing more with, fresh plants, which aren't as intensive, but there again, the cause of the being out of balance is less likely to be so intense because they're addressing it immediately. Extra chemical receptors are created to help them find these plants. When enough molecules have been received by the chemical receptors, they fire and they send electrical messages to the brain. Now the brain can then take those messages and farm them out into other areas of the brain or into other areas of the body.
Astonishing.
Sorry, the sympathetic and parasympathetic system, whether or not the body needs to be stimulated or calmed, all kinds of things like that. It's all to do. I mean, when you say essential oils to people, I do stuff with animals and essential oils, I know I can see that look on their face where they've got me dancing around the room with a tambourine, singing a song, and it's a science. It's to do with fundamental neuroscience, basically. And, at the end of the day, plants were the original medicine before, pharmaceutical medicine now obviously takes or mimics constituents from plants, but they are extremely effective. And that's basically how they work. It's all to do with signals and messengers.
Wow. So how long has it taken you to actually learn all this?
I started studying last summer, so just over a year so far. I was doing a degree at the same time, so slightly overloaded.
Slightly.
So now started doing the equine studies because it's just so fabulous. I just can't keep away. I've been very lucky enough to work with lots of different animals because of my studies. I've had access to everything. As I said, I work with cats a lot at the RSPCA hospital. That's really, really nice that they're very supportive of this mechanism and they can see that it really helps their animals. That's an environment where it can be incredibly valuable because you've got a lot of stressed, distressed animals which have had a lot of trauma. And apart from the fact that it's horrible for them, it can affect, their chances of rehoming, because you can have an animal that's appearing to be terribly aggressive and it's not aggressive at all. It's really scared and it's really unhappy. And what's lovely is when I go in sometimes the week after and see the notes from the previous week of people saying, oh my goodness, this is like a different cat. It's amazing. And it's really gratifying to see, how quickly it for just over a year now. And cats, dogs, chickens, ferrets, reindeer, all types. My own chickens are fabulous. Really, it's really useful. Really helps, especially if they get egg bound. It's marvelously useful. But all kinds of animals, it's applicable to all, and it's just a really lovely thing to be able to do.
Oh. You really helped my dog. She was a number of bits and pieces. You've been absolutely phenomenal with her, and I would have no hesitation in calling you back in again to help me to resolve the issues with her. You're absolutely brilliant, and your way with the animal is obviously really important as well. In that not actually pushing for anything to happen, for it to truly allow it the space to actually self-medicate. I just thought watching you was just lovely, absolutely lovely.
Oh, well, it was my it is a pleasure to do it. It really is. And as long as I can always convey to the owners that if somebody wants their animal to be seen, that's a really important thing, is that let's not make an hour appointment because it's not going to work. It's even if you just don't want that time pressure on you, and it is all about being patient and listening, and it's so nice for the animal to have that facility. Because if you imagine if you were sick and you couldn't speak and you couldn't really move your arms and legs to sort of wave around, and people were trying to fix you, and you were sitting thinking, no, no, that's not what I want. So it's lovely for them to have A, access to these extracts, and B, to have a way, a technique which enables them to be listened to, because it's so important.
It was beautiful watching you. Anyway.
Oh, thank you.
It was. You blew me away, to be honest, and I didn't know what else to do with my dog. I didn't want to take her to the vet for medication, and in fact I'd taken her because I'd got to a point where I didn't know what to do anymore. And the vet just said, oh, we'll have to open her up to actually see what might be going on. But they said they couldn't feel any tumours, they couldn't see anything, but you just couldn't go near the side of her body. And I thought, well, I don't really want to put my dog through surgery just to find out that there's what might be there when they can't even feel anything. So I when I heard about you, I was so pleased. So pleased. And you have done a phenomenal job with my dog, I have to say it.
Well, I'm really happy she responded so well. And I'm glad you mentioned the vet, actually, because another important point to mention is we are not substitute for the vet. If somebody called me and they said my animal's really ill, really in pain, really whatever the problem was, my first question would always be, and so would any practitioner, have you spoken to your vet? Have you taken the animal to the vet? Because it's very important. 2 scales. One, that is just I can't diagnose, as I think I explained to you. That's not what I do. I just offer these things initially on the basis of the information I've been given. But if the animal shows no interest in any of that, I might think, well, let's offer some other things. It's always safe, because as long as you are never ever forcing anything on the animal, and I do mean that in any way, that's whether you're shoving something under its nose or holding its head so you can apply things, all of that is what we would consider forcible behaviour, and it's totally against how zoopharmacognasy works. So we're not a substitute for the vet, but rather than the word alternative medicine, I much prefer the term complementary, because zoopharmacognasy really is hugely complementary. I would always encourage any owner to, keep the lines of communication open. If I was visiting them and their animal was also seeing a vet, it's like, please let your vet know what you're doing, keep them apprised. And it can really, really work well, because, again, aren't in conventional medicine. So they can work really, really well together. But what you did was exactly correct, to take your animal to the vet first. And then as it happened, it worked. The Zoopharmacognasy did seem to work really, really well for Frost. And I'm really, really so happy about that.
Brilliant. Okay, Siobhan, well, thank you very, very much for coming on the show and talking about Zoopharmacognasy to my audience, because I want everybody to know that this is out there and that you can use it, and it's an alternative to medication. All the medications that animals are going on to nowadays is so, so sad, when actually people like yourself are out there offering a clear and positive alternative.
Yeah, it is really positive, Debbie, and I think it's, as I said, only really started probably just over 30 years ago, is when people first started looking at apes self-medicating and could really see a pattern. So fast forward, and suddenly, I mean, for the first time, Cognacy module now being included in the equine studies at Greenwich University. So that's really nice. It's really validating that they, the value of this science is so obvious that they're now including it in equine studies, because they're very beneficial. I would say, if anybody does want to do it, it really is something that does need studying, though. That's the thing. It sounds like, oh, I've got some oils. There's a lot of things that people would need to learn in order to practice safely. Some of the extracts contraindicate, some of the extracts are unsuitable for pregnant animals, some of them are photoreactive, lots of different things. It really is important. It's not saying that nobody could do it at home, but I wouldn't, it's not something that somebody should launch themselves into without really learning about the extracts first. But it is a fabulous, really positive, really, really safe way to enable animals' well-being, and I'm really excited about it. I think it's only going to grow and grow. So
when do you qualify?
When I'm on my case. Well, yes, I've got to do some more case studies. I'm hoping to be qualified by early next year in small mammals, and then I'll go on to do the equine, and that will finish probably the end of next year. Yeah.
So we've got a little bit of time to wait, unless you want to become a case study for Siobhan. Siobhan, thank you so, so much for coming on Food for Thought. It's been really fascinating.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Debbie.
Bye.
Bye-bye.